This video is brought to you by the 3-Minute Board Game patrons. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. Kia ora koutou and welcome to this very special 3-Minute Board Games video about Final Girl Season 1. Now I'm sitting here in front of all of Final Girl, but we're only going to be talking about Season 1 here, and that is these first 5 boxes and the Terror from Above vignette. So all the stuff here. One of the reasons I'm sitting in front of the boxes is I want to talk about what I got as review copies and what I purchased myself. So Season 1, those first 5 boxes, the core box, and Terror from Above, I got as review copies from Van Ryder Games back when the game initially came out. I then backed on Kickstarter Season 2, which is the next 5 boxes, Season 3, which is the next 5 boxes, and the North Pole Nightmare on Kickstarter myself, so I paid for those. Then I decided, actually I really like Final Girl and I want to make a bunch more content for it, so I reached out for some review copies for Season 4. So I've got the Shriek standalone and the Bad Times at Buddylands are review copies from Van Ryder Games. Just so we're above board and we know exactly what I've paid for and what is review copies. Of course, as we are talking about only Season 1 really in this video, we're talking about things that I got as review copies. Now, what's the video going to contain? Well, I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive on every single killer, every single location, and every Final Girl. I'm going to give my thoughts on each and every one of them. I'm also going to rank each killer, location, and Final Girl. And while doing so, talk about their strengths, weaknesses, and various quirks, including dropping a bunch of strategy tips from my time playing the game. Now, how much Final Girl have I played? It's a lot, but in specific preparation for this video, I went ahead and played through all of the scenarios in the lore book for Season 1. And I played those scenarios until I beat them. So at the very least, I have played every single killer at every single location, and I have won against every single killer at every single location within Season 1. Hopefully that is enough reps of this game to make you feel like I know what I'm talking about. And as always, 3-Minute Board Games is an independent channel. We do not do paid content. If you want to keep independent voices in board game media, please consider supporting us on Patreon. And with that promo out of the way, let's get on to ranking the killers first. Now, one final note before we get into this ranking. I'm ranking every killer, location, and Final Girl, but I don't really hate any of them. There's definitely ones I prefer, and there's definitely ones I think have flaws with them, but there's none I absolutely loathe. I'll gladly play any single feature film from the Final Girl series. They haven't put out one yet that I've just gone, I want to throw that in the trash. But anyway, let's get on to ranking the killers first, then location, then Final Girls. And my least favorite killer is the Poltergeist of Creech Manor.
It knows what scares you. It has from the very beginning. Now let's go get your daughter.
Now, the Poltergeist of Creech Manor is clearly inspired by not only Poltergeist, but a whole bunch of other supernatural horror films. There's like a whole supernatural horror subgenre where ghosts are haunting a place. Let's take a deep look at the Poltergeist itself. Now, the obvious thing to note about the Poltergeist is that they have no health. The only way to defeat the Poltergeist is to find Carolyn and escape with her, and she is hidden in one of the various item decks. The Poltergeist starts on 3 horror, which isn't too bad. The Poltergeist has a move and attack icon on its killer action, and it starts with 2 feet. So from turn 1, the Poltergeist is going to be moving around the board 2 spaces and killing someone each and every turn without terror cards. The Poltergeist Bloodlust track gets to its dark power very quickly, and it has a bunch of horror increases on it as well. It's not too bad. The problem is its initial setup of moving to and attacking. That's difficult to deal with. Let's look at the dark powers. Invisible Barrier is easy enough to manage, as the dark power should be revealed reasonably quickly, and you should be able to plan for this by playing a rest card or 2. Eternal Despair is kind of annoying, but it's just an action tax. Every time you roll a 1, you're going to lose a time. That's annoying, but it's just a drag. The dark power I really don't like is Stiff Wind, because this reduces your walks and sprints to a maximum of 1 and 2 spaces each. If you're playing on a big map, this absolutely sucks. Looking at the finale cards, nothing as easy as the Poltergeist come to you and attack you straight away, and all of your 0 cost cards now start costing time. It's only 1 attack, but it is a big action penalty. It's not too bad though. She will soon be lost is really easy to deal with. This is just 3 extra turns. You're on a timer. Compared to a lot of finale cards, this is pretty moderate. And then Relentless Assault, this can end the game really quickly, because it's a minimum of 2 attacks you're going to be taking, and there's only so much damage you can prevent each round. And you just can't get away from the Poltergeist here. The Forgetting Something Dark Power does increase the difficulty, or at least make it more consistently difficult, because you have to find Carolyn and Mr. Floppy in the item decks. But as far as epic dark powers go, this is one you can really manage. And the epic finale, Demonic Possession, I don't think this one is as bad as Relentless Assault. I think this is much more manageable. It's 1 attack which you can mitigate, and then it's 1 damage automatically. As far as epic finales go, this one's a bit toned down. Right, let's take a look at some of their terror cards. So both of the Poltergeist minor dark powers absolutely suck. It's great that once you've found Carolyn, you can get rid of them, but both of them make it harder for you to get to Carolyn. Having your first space being a panicked move absolutely sucks, especially if you've already got restricted movement from Stiff Wind. And because the Poltergeist's whole deal is finding Carolyn and escaping with her, losing a dice on search rolls absolutely sucks. And the 3-time tax on this is a lot. You really feel that. And unlike the other killers, you can't just do damage to the Poltergeist to get rid of these minor powers. They're there until you find Carolyn. And once you found Carolyn, you're pretty damn close to winning anyway in most cases. Now, some of the Poltergeist's other effects are to place the Poltergeist in your space that attack you, and to create forms that attack you as well. Corporeal Form and Did That Clown Just Move are about the only reason to buy attack cards, or to equip weapons. And it's a bit of dirty pull that Poltergeist can do some damage to you unless you counterattack, because you're just not going to be planning for an attack strategy here. The Poltergeist also has some really horribly unfair cards. Where the hell did the storm come from can kill so many victims. I've routinely seen this take out 3 or 4 victims at one time. And the same with Unstoppable Evil. It's roll a die and lose that many victims or take that much damage. And if you're playing a low health final girl, this could be a choice between either game over or losing 5 or 6 victims. That's horrible. And in some cases in the end game, this card can just kill you outright. And then there's Carolyn, Where Are You? A game that basically steals the win condition from you and shuffles it back into an item pile. The reason the Poltergeist is my least favorite of the killers is because of her victory conditions. You need to find Carolyn in that stack, and sometimes that's the first location you search. You can spend your first turn moving to a location and getting a search card. Then on your second turn, you search that location, you find Carolyn, and you book straight for the exit. You can sometimes just win against the Poltergeist in 2 turns. Other times, she's the last card you find, and it's this massive swing in difficulty that I don't particularly care for. The Poltergeist also is quite a relentless killer, so it's on your case the whole time, and it has a whole bunch of cards that slow you down. And that would be all well and good if it wasn't for that victory condition, because that victory condition is so damned random. I almost think it's worth playing with the epic power that means you have to find Mr. Floppy and Carolyn to get out, because at least then it's going to be consistently difficult. I really like the idea behind the Poltergeist, which is to have a killer you can't just stab to death, that you have to figure out a different way to beat. But I feel the variability in the win conditions is what puts the Poltergeist at the bottom of my table. At number 5, we have the birds from Terror from Above.
I have never known birds of different species to flock together. The very concept is unimaginable. Why, if that happened, we wouldn't have a chance.
Now, the birds are clearly inspired by Hitchcock's The Birds. And I really like the idea of the vignettes. Having killers that aren't just individuals, that are a big swarm of something. That allows you to bring in a whole bunch of other horror tropes that you wouldn't be able to capture with just a solitary killer. Let's take a look at how the birds work, because they're a little bit different to everyone else. My 5th rank killer are the birds from Terror from Above. Now, the birds work a little differently to the other killers. Instead of a killer appearing on the board, you replace that with 3 birds. You then put 1 bird at every other space on the board that does not currently have a victim in it. The main action the birds will take each turn is this spawn birds action. And here you'll roll 2 dice. And you get to choose how these dice are allocated. One value will be the number of birds that spawn, and the other value will be where they spawn. So here with 2 and 4, we got to choose the nearest exit and put 2 birds on that, making that into a 3-bird spot. You can't have more than 3 birds in an area. So if we spawn 3 birds here on top of the one that was already there, we'd have to place a bird in an adjacent area, like so. Now, as well as spawning birds, before you do that, you attack. but attacks only happen in spaces where you have 3 birds. That means outside of terror cards, you're safe anywhere where there's only 1 or 2 birds. The birds have a very short bloodlust track, with 2 horror advances, an event, and your dark power being on the 3rd tier. The birds' dark powers are not a good time. They're just waiting to strike. If there's ever 3 birds in your space, the horror value goes up by 2. It's quite difficult to keep the bird count down, so it's going to be very easy for this to happen, especially seeing it's during upkeep, which means it's after you've acted, but also after they've spawned new birds. Run for your life isn't too bad. It's just a victim panicking and a chance that they'll be killed if they go into a space with 2 or more birds. It's not great, but it's manageable. And Birdnado, this is another one that is manageable because you can attack the birds, but it does also happen in upkeep. So more birds spawn and spread everywhere through various cards and actions, you can lose a lot of health very quickly. Foul Aggression as a finale is awful. You're spawning 2 sets of birds and they're attacking as well. This is going to flood the board incredibly quickly. And, oh, did I mention that if you can't place birds on the board, you do automatically lose as well. So if there's 3 in every space, that's game over. That's going to happen really quickly with this. Endless Swarm is a tax on your health, but it's a manageable one, and sometimes you can use ranged weapons to reduce the health of birds before you move into that space. And Insurmountable Odds, this is a horrible finale, because you're going to be spawning twice, and you have to spawn the highest number of birds when you roll. So you're probably putting down 8 to 10 birds a turn. That's going to fill the board up really quickly. How do you win the scenario though? Well, you need to activate these special victims and make them spawn, and you do that by activating your ultimate ability by rescuing other victims. So the difficulty of this scenario is how many of these special victims spawn after you've unlocked your ultimate. If you're playing a low difficulty, it's only 1 victim, and they appear in the furthest away orange bordered area on the board. And medium and hard difficulty are 2 and 3 special victims respectively, and they pop up in the other orange areas. Now this means if you're using a location, you can't use any event card that would ordinarily put a special victim into play. So just discard those and draw a new one. The terror deck for the birds is very straightforward. There's 4 cards in it really. And once you learn what these 4 cards do, you can manage the birds quite well. Because you know the horror track's going to bump up quite quickly. They're going to spawn a lot more birds, and they are going to attack in places where birds outnumber victims. They also have a single minor dark power that prevents you from saving victims until you've killed a bunch of birds. So the reason the birds are 5th is quite similar to the reason why the Poltergeist is my least favorite killer. And that's because playing as the birds, it's all about running around the board as fast as you can. It's all about moving and keeping yourself alive. And that takes out a whole bunch of what makes Final Girl for me. Sure, you can do some attacks against the birds to thin out their numbers, but really the best course of action here is to sprint, 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 get those victims and get them out of there as soon as possible. You're not really even searching for items. You're just wanting to move as fast as possible because the game is on a very, very strict timer. And I think that's just slightly dull. Like, it's not a terrible gameplay experience. Like, Terror from Above is a great change of pace because it does something slightly different with the rules. And it is a different experience, and it's just a different way of approaching the game. But it's not one you want to overdo. And after playing and beating 5 scenarios of the birds, I don't want to play them again for quite a while. Let's just say that. Moving right along, my number 4 killer is Geppetto.
The puppets of Andre Toulon. First, they made you smile. And then, they made you die. Blade, Pinhead, Jester, Leech Woman, and Tunneler.
Now, Geppetto is inspired by a whole bunch of different things, but I think the standout reference here would be to the Puppet Master series. Evil puppets are included all the way through horror, so this is a great trope to see included. Now let's look at how Geppetto works. Next up we have Geppetto the Puppet Master, who starts on 4 horror and has 8 health. Geppetto's big feature is their 3 puppets. So the minion action is to spawn a puppet and then have all their puppets move each turn. Now the puppets can only move 2 spaces away from Geppetto. They are connected by strings as you would. Geppetto's killer action is just a stab in his default space, so he doesn't move initially. His bloodlust track starts off pretty weak as well, with 1 stab and 1 move. Geppetto is not going to beat you up straight off the bat. He's going to rely on his puppets to do a lot of the work. His Bloodlust track does tick up very slowly, but even at the top tier, he's only doing 2 damage. He's moving pretty quick, but he's only doing 2 direct damage. And I love that there are multiple events on this track. You get a lot more out of a location with more event pulls. The puppets only have 1 health, and they attack for 1 damage. And they'll only attack when triggered by certain cards or in the finale. If you kill a puppet, it goes back to the exhausted space, and it will head up to ready next turn. So he's only bringing down 1 a turn, so you can get on top of them and manage them, because they only have 1 health. Of course, the dark powers do boost the puppets. So massive abominations mean that each puppet ignores the first damage dealt to it each turn. Essentially, they got 2 health. Immortal Master means you need to kill the puppets before you can kill Geppetto. That's not too bad and pretty easy to manage because the puppets stay close to him. And Weapons Graph, this one can be really annoying because sometimes you get swarmed by the puppets and they'll all attack you. Now, 3 damage is one thing, that's ouch, but it's manageable. 6 is hard to counter. Onto the finales, we have I Made Your Friends. This means the puppets can now move and attack, and Geppetto can move and attack as well. It also allows Geppetto to control the victims, moving them towards you and having them attack. This is a fascinating finale and plays out very unlike anything else. I really like this finale. No Strings Attached puts Geppetto and the puppets into full attack mode. He'll be chasing you all around the board and attacking, and the puppets will be chasing you as well. And they're going to be moving quite a bit faster. So theoretically, they can have up to 4 movement each. You're not getting away from them. And finally, Remember Them, which brings all the puppets into play, which they're probably going to be mostly in play anyway, so that's not that big a deal. Makes the puppets slower, but gives Geppetto 2 attack actions. So with the puppets having attack actions and Geppetto having 2 attack actions, if he catches up to you at this point, you're in a lot of trouble. The Epic Dark Power is quite cool. It means if Geppetto and the puppets actually catch you, you're dead, basically. You've got 1 hope at surviving, and if you don't, you're out of the game. Really neat Epic Dark Power. And the finale, the puppets just explode. And from this point on, there's no puppets. It's just Geppetto chasing you down, trying to stab you twice each turn. I have been absolutely killed by puppet bombs in the past. Now, running through his minor dark powers. Both of these are things you're going to want to get rid of very quickly. Normally, you want to stay away from Geppetto and rescue a whole bunch of people. If you're doing that, you're going to be losing health each turn with Am I a Puppet? And again, puppets anywhere, it's just a horror booster, and you want to keep horror under control against pretty much every killer. Let's take a look at some of his terror cards, and you can see some of these are absolute game changers. Boxed in with Nowhere to Go increases horror by 2, and then all the victims adjacent to a puppet square panic. And if they panic into a space of a puppet, they're killed immediately. Now, there's 3 puppets in play and a whole bunch of victims still on the board. This can wipe out a whole bunch of victims in one fell swoop. And Razor Puppet Strings. Again, in some maps, if Geppetto ends up in a central space and he's surrounded by victims, this can really, really change the game. I played one game where an event drew everyone into the big top, and then Geppetto appeared there and killed everyone. I think it was 6 or 7 victims because of 1 card. And then Endless Maddening Laughter, that's another one that causes panic in all spaces where there are puppets and Geppetto himself, and then there's a chance of victims being killed. All of these cards can do a ton of collateral damage, especially if you draw them relatively early in the game, say turns 2 or 3, they're at their worst. But there's still quite a few victims, and Geppetto's got some puppets on the board. By default, Geppetto doesn't move much, but some of his terror cards will allow him to move, and also rapidly reposition his puppets. You can sometimes feel quite safe against Geppetto because he doesn't move, but then you'll draw some of these cards, and all of a sudden, the puppets will swarm you, or he'll teleport to you with his puppets in tow and do some damage. So why is Geppetto my number 4? Well, simply put, because you can kind of rush the guy. He starts with only 1 movement and 1 stab, and he drops 1 minion a turn. So if you're fortunate enough to pick up a weapon early in the game, you can head straight to him and start wailing on him. Now he has the ability to generate a lot of bloodlust by killing off victims using his puppets, but if you stay on top of the puppets and just go straight to Geppetto and start stabbing him to death, there's not a lot you can do to counter that. I think thematically he's super cool and interesting, but he's got a little bit of a vulnerability early in the game where you can rush him and just put him down in the first 4 or 5 turns. Geppetto's also boxed in with one of the hardest locations, and that tends to make him feel harder than he is, because if you play him at an easier location, he becomes quite an easy beat. The Carnival of Blood does a lot of work to build on Geppetto's reputation. He himself, he's okay, but he's pretty soft. My number 3 killer, which is possibly a controversial decision, is Inkanyamba. Inkanyamba, I believe, is a unique character created by AJ from Van Ryder games, and it's the only feature film in Season 1 that doesn't have strong links to an established horror franchise. It's a little bit of an odd box out in that regard. Inkanyamba, as far as I can tell in the community, is widely hated and people do not like him. But let's have a look at him a bit closer. Next up we have Inkanyamba, the Avenger. His killer action's unusual and it ties into his Killer Wrath ability. Now that's on the left side of the board. You'll have this marker that goes from 1 to 10. If it's at 1 to 2, increase it by 1. Then aside from that, he has a default attack action. His Bloodlust track is very straightforward. The Dark Power unlocks at the 3rd step, and he has quite high damage and movement once he gets up the Bloodlust track. Also, 9 health is pretty tanky. The main thing you're going to worry about with Inkanyamba is this Killer Wrath track. There are going to be a ton of cards that get played that advance on this track, and there's very few ways to reduce the number on that track. Some of those cards will say Unleash Red Lightning Bolt, so Unleash Killer Wrath. And then based on where your marker is, you resolve the effects on there. A lot of those are horror increases, but there's also bonus move and attack actions. If he's right at the top, he's going to regain 2 health, increase horror by 1, and then he's going to move and attack twice. Pretty scary stuff if Wrath gets out of control. Let's look at his Dark Powers. Feast of Anger. Whenever his Killer Wrath increases, he recovers some health. This one's pretty easy to mitigate, because you're hoping by the time you get around to really fighting him, that you'll be able to get it over and done with in a couple of rounds. And at that time, hopefully he won't recover too much health. And if he's already on full health, this doesn't really help him at all. Rising Dread, on the other hand, sucks, because you can have multiple triggers increasing Killer Wrath, and that also increases horror. And higher Killer Wrath also increases horror. So it's very easy for this to cascade out of control and leave you on 1 dice. And Volatile Temper, at the end of upkeep, make a horror roll. If you get any successes, no effect, but if you fail, you unleash. And again, that's resolve where the marker is on the Killer Wrath track. So you could get attacked at the end of the upkeep phase. Of course, because this is a horror roll, more dice is better. So if you are on rolling 3 dice against them, there's a good chance this won't resolve. All the finales have Unleash on them. So here you're going to want that killer track to be under control. And when this one's revealed, it goes straight to 10. You do get to take 6 time with action cards into your hand, but with his Killer Wrath up on 10, he's going to be moving around and doing some hideous damage. Savage Whirlwind's very straightforward. Going to unleash his Killer Wrath, increase it by 1, and then move and attack twice. This is a lot of damage. And Inkanyamba, when he's powered up, can be very fast. And then there's Violent Tantrum, which unleashes the Killer Wrath and increases it by a bunch. Then it's a simple move and attack. His epic Dark Power is awful. When he kills a victim, kill a second one in a same or adjacent space. This can make the Bloodlust track just rocket up once you hit this Dark Power. And Dragon to Hell is one of the toughest epic finales in the game. You increase the Killer Wrath track by 2, then you unleash, then Inkanyamba gets a move and attack. But more importantly, when it's revealed, you remove all atonement cards from the game. Now, atonement cards. You've probably been sitting there going, how do I deal with Killer Wrath? This sounds like it's going to get out of control really, really quickly. And it does. But you can use atonement cards. So here's an atonement card, and you can roll up to 3 successes on it. It allows you to decrease the red lightning bolt, which is Killer Wrath, which we're talking about, and also Divine Wrath, which is the yellow lightning bolt, which comes with the Sacred Grove location. We'll talk about that later. You need to roll 3 successes to reduce it to 1 though, and it is a 2-time card. Now this is a big tax on your actions, but you really do need to keep Inkanyamba's Killer Wrath under control. Otherwise, he's gonna stab you a lot. Inkanyamba's minor powers aren't too bad. Boiling Anger can potentially tick up Killer Wrath a bit, but you do 2 health damage and you get rid of it. It's not that big a deal, and the same with Outrageaholic. Each time it's increase it by additional 1. Now that's bad, but I'd rather have these in play than probably drawing another terror card that's shooting it up and unleashing it, as you'll see with his other terror cards. So Inkanyamba doesn't have a default move, but he has a lot of terror cards that allow him to move rapidly and stab things. These also tend to increase his Killer Wrath as well. Then he has his Wrath cards, and he's got 5 different ones of these. They all unleash his Killer Wrath and then increase it by a different amount, then allow him to attack. So if his Killer Wrath is already high, you'll be getting multiple moves and multiple attacks off these cards. And one big note about Inkanyamba is he is much, much worse to fight at the Sacred Groves than he is anywhere else, because of the Divine Wrath track going as well. Atonements are all well and good. if you've only got one track to deal with. With both these tracks going off at the same time, things can spiral out of control with Inkanyamba at the Sacred Groves faster than any other combination that I've played. So yeah, a lot of people are down on Inkanyamba, but I think that's mostly because they play him almost exclusively at the Sacred Groves, which is a really hard location to start with. That's made so much harder by having both the Killer Wrath and Divine Wrath tracks being countered by the same atonement cards. It's such a limited resource, and you're having to spread it among 2 tracks instead of 1. I think Inkanyamba is really challenging and really interesting. He's a fast-paced, fast-moving, brutal killer to deal with. And his Killer Wrath track is quite vicious, but you can stay on top of that. I think most of his bad reputation comes from being paired with the Sacred Groves, which is an incredibly hard location. And as I said earlier, when you combine Inkanyamba and the Sacred Groves, he becomes very difficult to beat, one of the hardest in the game. And not fun difficult to beat. It's that kind of difficult to beat where you roll a random number and that moves one chart up, which makes you roll another random number, which moves another chart up, and you cross-reference those charts, and oh look, you lost. It feels like you're not remotely in control of what happens when Inkanyamba is at the Sacred Groves. But try him at other locations, and you'll find that he's quite interesting. He's a very relentless, hard-out, brutal killer, and a good challenge. That's why he's my 3rd favorite killer in Season 1. My number 2 killer is Dr. Fright.
Let's get high.
Dr. Fright is probably the least subtly inspired character in the whole series. He's Freddy Krueger. This is Nightmare on Elm Street. No 2 ways about that. And Freddy Krueger is such a unique character in the horror pantheon. There's so many strong, silent, brooding killers, and Freddy's just a chatty, obnoxious bitch. Let's see how they capture that vibe in this box. Next up we have Dr. Fright, who starts with 4 horror and 9 health. Dr. Fright has a sleep mechanic where you're either awake or asleep. If you're awake, you cannot attack or be attacked by Dr. Fright. We'll talk about how the sleep mechanic works in a little bit. But what you need to know now is that a rest card can put you to sleep, as can some terror and event cards. And while you're asleep, you can damage Dr. Fright, but at the end of each round there's a chance he'll be able to attack you as well. His default killer action doesn't have a move, he just stays there and he stabs. Then the Bloodlust track starts off at only 1 damage and 1 movement. There are 5 horror advancements on this Bloodlust track. So when it ticks up, it can get out of control pretty quickly. Never really did, isn't that big a deal. It just makes him harder to kill at the end. This can potentially be absolutely nothing, or it could be 5 or 6 health. On average though, it works out around about 3 health. Compared to some of the other things you can get in Dark Powers, this is pretty manageable. Such as the Frightmare is inevitable. Dr. Fright can attack you even if you're awake. Now there's a bit of a strategy with Dr. Fright to just sort of stay in his space a little, which means he'll target you but he can't damage you. So you sort of jam yourself in his way so he can't get to other victims that easily. This kind of blows that plan to pieces. Of course, the reverse isn't true. You can't attack him. Pitchfork Assault can get out of hand pretty quickly, especially if you get damaged by incidental effects. Now, because Dr. Fright does tend to stay in the same place and stab away, this might not trigger that often, but when coupled with a bad finale, this can make things get out of hand really quickly. Right, in the Time to Die finale, Dr. Fright gets off the bench and he starts actively hunting you. And if you don't fall asleep, you're going to lose health. So it pretty much channels you towards a final climactic fight with Dr. Fright. And Face Your Fright does a similar thing. It puts you to sleep, and once you're asleep, you stay in the boiler room. And again, we'll cover the boiler room shortly. But that means there's no real respite here. You're going to be taking damage and fighting Dr. Fright until the end. And then we have my favorite finale, which is Everyone Must Die. This is one of the reasons I like Dr. Fright. I really like this finale. So Dr. Fright gets removed from the board. He becomes like an ephemeral spirit, haunting the whole neighborhood and killing everyone. And for the remainder of the game, he can be attacked from any space if you're asleep. And what he does is instead of moving and attacking, he just kills 2 victims or does you 4 damage. So you're on an absolute timer. Maybe 2-3 turns at best to defeat Dr. Fright before you simply run out of victims and time. The shock factor epic dark power is absolutely awful. Dr. Fright can panic people in multiple ways, and this card has to have a max 3 per turn to stop it from getting completely out of control. And in Dream Warfare, ignoring all damage effects from item cards absolutely sucks because he's already got 9 health. You're going to be wanting to get at least a +1 or a +2 damage card if you can to take him on for the final battle. Having to do at least 9 damage, potentially more, with just cards is a lot of effort, especially as in this finale, he's stabbing you twice. Plus, as we'll show, possibly damaging you a little bit from the boiler room. So how the boiler room works is as follows. There are 4 boiler room cards and they are split into quadrants. 4 distinct different quadrants. The art is exactly the same on all the cards except in 1 quadrant each. However, in 1 quadrant on each card is a picture of Dr. Fright. So when you fall asleep, these 4 cards will be shuffled and placed under the asleep card. Then at the end of each round, you'll pull at least one of these cards to one side, and you can expose any 2 quadrants. If Dr. Fright is not there, you don't take any damage. If you do see Dr. Fright there, he attacks you. You can also play the percentages, guessing where Dr. Fright's going to be. But of course, you can always get those percentages wrong. Now, once you've gone through all 4 cards, you wake up, and you shuffle and reset the deck. Let's look at some of Dr. Fright's terror cards. Now, Hellish Pursuit and Endless Sleep, they just make the boiler room more difficult or more dramatic. Endless Sleep's another way that the killer can force you to fall asleep. So while Dr. Fright doesn't have any default movement on his killer action, he has a bunch on his terror cards. You also see that Slasher can cause a heck of a lot of victims to panic, which can tie in with that previous dark power that killed victims that panic. So while you can sometimes count on Dr. Fright to just sit there and kind of just stab the same area over and over, these cards allow him to do some dramatic things. He also has some very interesting terror cards that are absolutely flavorful. Better Stay Up Late sucks. If you're awake, you lose a die on every horror rolls through the next action phase. It's almost like you might as well skip that action phase because you're just not going to succeed anyway. And if you're asleep, you can potentially get hit 3 or 4 times with the boiler room. Then he moves and attacks. This is an evil card. Then there's he slicing off his own fingers, which is kind of terrifying. He just rushes towards you, takes the damage, increases horror by 3. He's just standing there like mutilating himself. It's got real gross stuff, but very, very Freddy Krueger. And then you have a very rare thing. But if this is a dream, then I can. Which is a terror card that actively helps you. Or at the very least gives you a choice that can be very beneficial. Like taking the top item card from any deck, that could be huge. If there's a good weapon on the other side of the board that you just want to grab. And moving to any space you wish can be a big deal as well. So yeah, Dr. Fright, the boiler room can be a bit fiddly. I'm not going to lie about that. What I tend to do is look up at the sky and then manipulate the card and then look down. So if I accidentally slide something out of the way and show another card, I don't get to see it. Because if you're just staring at it, you can bump cards and reveal other things, and that can mess things up. So yeah, if you're playing with the boiler room, just be careful about how you manipulate the cards so you're not seeing too much. Why I like Dr. Fright is he just changes the game dramatically sometimes. In some games, sure, he can just kind of stay there and do nothing and go "Rah" at you. But then all of a sudden, he can change the rules of the game in interesting ways. Move around the board, kill people at random, and I love the whole theme of being asleep and having to be asleep to engage him. He can kill other people, of course. He can kill all the victims while you're awake. But you can't get after him until you fall asleep. And when you do fall asleep, there's a chance he's going to stab you. I think super thematic implementation of this character. And he does just enough interesting things for me to really like him. I think Dr. Fright's a whole bunch of fun. And obviously that means my favorite killer in Final Girl is Hans.
If the crack don't get you, then the hookers will.
Hans is of course inspired by Jason Voorhees from the Friday the 13th series, with a heaping helping of Michael Myers from Halloween as well. He's the classic masked slasher. Let's find out why he's so cool. Up next we have Hans, who starts on 4 horror and has a whopping 12 health. His default action is just an attack action, and he starts doing 2 damage, but only moves 1 space when he moves. His Bloodlust track has 4 horror increases and the dark power on it. But the terrifying thing is, when he's fully powered up, he's moving 3 and doing 5 damage. 5 damage is a lot. His Dark Powers feed's pretty easy to manage. For every victim he kills, he recovers health. Ideally, against Hans, if he draws this, you're going to want to clear the board before taking him on. Dark Obsession can get really rough, especially because of the amount of damage Hans does. He can just pile on the attacks if he catches you. And then there's Sledgehammer Massacre. For every stab, Hans attacks you and each victim in the space once. He can clean out a whole big bunched up area. Or if he jumps you and you're carrying 2 victims, he can do damage to you and kill those 2 victims. Sledgehammer Massacre is really rough. His finales are all universally awful. Bloodbath is a double move and then double attack. Butcher Bloodlust increases terror, which can recover health, then a move and a single attack. And Darker, Darker, Darkest lets you draw a second Dark Power card, and he's still moving twice and attacking. The Epic Dark Power Blood Frenzy, for each victim he kills, increases Bloodlust by 1. So that's going to get him to the end of the Bloodlust track really quickly. And the Epic Finale is just silly. Death Blow. 3 moves, 3 attacks. You are not getting away from Hans if he draws this one out. If you survived more than 2 rounds in this Death Blow finale, well done, I'm impressed. Let's take a look at his terror cards. And his minor powers are just so straightforward and so simple, but yet so damned awful. 1 does increase damage, 1 does increase movement. You're going to want to get rid of these as quickly as possible. So Hans has a very unusual tempo with his terror cards. You end up with a bunch of cards that increases horror quite dramatically and allow him to move and recover. And in the case of he just came out of nowhere, move quite dramatically. These are sort of power-up cards. Then he has his brutal attack cards, like Horrific Hammer Rush, Taking Souvenirs, and he kept swinging his hammer and killing and killing. He can really pile up the bodies incredibly quickly if he draws these terror cards, and shoot himself up the Bloodlust track as well. Hans is a brute. Hans is an absolute relentless, vile brute who will beat you up. He's just a great killer. While all the other killers in this season have their own quirks and strengths and weaknesses, Hans is just all strengths. He's just a tough guy to fight. He's implacable. He hits like a Mack truck, and he takes down victims relentlessly. Some people see Hans as like the starter character that you play against because he's got relatively simple rules. And that's true, but he's also awesome at the same time. And even in later seasons, they never quite hit the same highs of getting an easy to play killer who feels super thematic and is super tough to play against as well. Hans is just really good peak Final Girl design and peak Final Girl theme. And my favorite killer, and possibly my favorite killer across all the seasons. Right, that's all the killers out of the way. Let's move on to the locations. And if you've been watching the video closely, you shouldn't be too surprised what my least favorite location is. And that one is the Sacred Groves. As I mentioned before, the Sacred Groves is from the feature film that is a unique creation of AJ from Van Ryder Games. But the ideas behind it are explored in other places in horror, such as Pet Sematary and the Poltergeist movies themselves. So in Poltergeist, the house is built on top of a burial site. A sacred site, if you would. And Pet Sematary, well, that happens on sacred ground as well. The idea of disturbing a place that is sacred leads to retribution. And that's what Sacred Groves is all about. How well is it implemented, though? Alrighty, let's take a look at the Sacred Groves. The location that's part of the Slaughter in the Groves feature film. The Sacred Groves has 3 exit spaces, 3 search spaces, and these 3 special sacred site spaces. These are marked with a red border. These red bordered sacred sites will interact with a lot of the terror cards for location, as well as the Sacred Grove special mechanic, Divine Wrath. Let's look at Divine Wrath. Now this is a tracker that goes from 1 to 10. When you're told to increase Divine Wrath, you'll increase the tracker on here. When you're told to unleash Divine Wrath, you'll follow the instructions of where the marker is up to. The top levels of Divine Wrath are pretty horrific, with number 10 making you discard all your action cards except Atonement. Other top level effects include rapidly increasing horror, making you lose time and action cards. Divine Wrath really stinks. Regardless of what killer you're playing at the Sacred Groves, you'll have to add this additional track to the side of the Bloodlust track. It contains a number of extra effects that cause Divine Wrath to increase and to unleash. On top of that, when you reach your finale, you'll have to add this token to the end of your normal finale power. And this means Divine Wrath will be triggering a lot. Both of these additions just straight out make the killer harder to beat. No two ways about it. If you're playing on the Sacred Groves, you will get the Atonement card. And Divine Wrath is the yellow lightning bolt on this card. Now you can keep Divine Wrath under control with Atonement, but it is an action tax and it is an extra thing you have to roll. Plus, to really nail it down, you need to get 3 successes, which is not particularly easy. The terror cards for the Sacred Groves will quite frequently focus on these sacred spaces, and the number of victims in them will dramatically increase Divine Wrath. This is also how Divine Wrath unleashes, and this can get out of hand really quickly. You can easily end up with a dozen victims in those sacred sites and the Divine Wrath track just going out of control. Especially as, if you notice, no one will notice if I break off one of these pretty branches. The bottom effect places some victims down and then moves all victims adjacent to the Holy Groves there. And there's multiple cards like this. which moves adjacent victims into one of the sacred sites. And that's a real problem with the Sacred Groves. You can be on top of Divine Wrath, but the terror cards just keep pumping it up. Thankfully, there's some unique equipment cards for the Sacred Groves that do help keep this under control. In particular, going into the final battle with the War Club is really good, because every time you hit the killer, you're also decreasing Wrath. And you can use this against Inkanyamba as well to reduce his killer Wrath. I really like the out of order signs, and I've tried my best to use them. They allow you to block off paths to sacred sites. And I've really wanted to get the strategy working, and it just hasn't quite come off for me. I think if you manage to get these two down here, it could really limit the amount of Divine Wrath you generate off these sacred sites. If possible, you don't want to draw too many events at the Sacred Groves. Things like Unholy Bloodshed. This is an absolute nightmare as an ongoing effect, because there are going to be victims dying in those sacred sites all the time. And then you get these three cards, Fire and Brimstone and Hallowed Ground. They change a sacred site to be more important either to the killer or to you. And then there's a really interesting close for maintenance. It allows you to discard your action cards, except Atonement, to close one of these sacred sites. If drawn at the right time, this can be an absolute game changer. Now, of course, my big problem with Sacred Groves is that Divine Wrath track, and it just ticking up and it being absolutely punished. The event cards can drive that track straight up and then trigger themselves, and you're losing cards. It's not fun difficulty. I enjoy a challenging game of Final Girl. I like it going down to the wire, even if I win or lose. What I don't particularly like is how when the Sacred Groves just decides you're going to draw a card and it's going to ratchet up that wrath level, and you're just going to throw out your entire hand. It's a hand building game, and losing your hand is just about the worst thing they could possibly put in any card or anything in this game, because it's not just making it difficult, it's taking away your agency and taking away your fun. And the Sacred Groves does that a little too much for my liking. I feel if Divine Wrath was just a little bit pared down or a slightly different mechanic, the idea of the sacred sites is really cool. I just think the Divine Wrath track is a little too brutal and a little bit awkward to manage and bring down. The Atonement cards, just an awkward mechanism in general. It's just an awkward system. And again, as I've said before, Inkanyamba comes in this box, and playing him at the Sacred Groves is just double difficulty, double nightmare, and managing two tracks. It's not a great combination. My number 4 location is Maple Lane. Now, Maple Lane is suburban America, and it's clearly inspired by Elm Street from the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but equally it fits for places like the setting for Halloween or any other suburban slasher. Let's take a look at what makes Maple Lane unique. Next we have Maple Lane from the Frightmare on Maple Lane feature film. Maple Lane has 4 search areas, so it has 4 search decks of 3 cards each. And these are put into quadrants. Northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest. There are 3 search spaces in each quadrant, and each one may only be successfully searched once. There are also 4 exit spaces at each of the cardinal points, with the middle 5 spaces forming a road. One of the quirks of this location is you cannot just enter an occupied search space. Those represent houses, and if there are still victims there, that means people are home and have got their doors locked. In that case, you need to use the Convince card, which is available only when playing at this location. It's a cheap enough card, but it is a little tax on your actions. If you successfully search a location, mark it with an X. Let's take a look at some of the terror cards. I said Don't Look Back is such a great card. It's such a good terror card design. You can end up with victims placed at exits, and you think they're relatively safe, and you can just run over there and save them, and everything will be okay. But then the killer teleports there and kills them. Fantastic design. Did you hear what happened on Maple Lane is also a really fun card, because it drops down 2 events and then draws the next terror card. Leads to some rapid acceleration. And then you have It Came Right Through the Yard, which allows the killer to move rapidly, kill rapidly, and also draw an event. Some of these cards are quite rough. In the equipment cards, I really like the Megaphone, because it allows you to move victims around, but makes the killer come after you. That's a really neat bonus ability, because it's one of the times the final girl can really jam herself in the way, and let a victim escape by drawing attention to herself. The Bible is very useful if you need to search this location a lot, and the odds and end cards allow you to leave a whole bunch of traps around, Home Alone styles. So you put a trap in a location, when the killer comes in, they take 2 damage, and then you run away. Some of the more interesting events include Fire, which can break out in either the boyfriend's house or the Smallies' house, but what that does is that kills everyone in there, and anyone who panics in there. Basically takes that location off the board. There's also some cards that add in extra victims that can really change things up. And then you've got Officer Cop, which is quite a fun card. He comes on one side and he slowly travels across the board, picking up victims and trying to save them. There's a lot to like about Maple Lane, but the one thing that pushes it down for me is all those search spaces. And having the item deck split into 4. This can just skew things quite dramatically. The Poltergeist on this map in particular is a right pain in the ass. Like, it's a very cool dynamic having to talk yourself into a house to get the equipment and then move people outside and let them escape, but it is also an extra level of busy work, because you have to cover all of those spaces if you're searching for something, as well as talk yourself into places that have victims. It just makes it feel a little grindy sometimes. Still, I do enjoy this location a lot more than the Sacred Groves. The gap between number 5 and 4 is pretty big here. It's a lot bigger than the gap between 4 and 3. My third favorite location is Creech Manor. Now, Creech Manor, strangely, isn't really inspired by Poltergeist at all, because Poltergeist takes place in a new subdivision. This is more like the Amityville Horror, the idea of a big, spooky, haunted old place, where there are supernatural forces that just do not want you to stay the night. So theme-wise, it's an absolute banger, because a haunted house, that's horror in a nutshell. Next up we have Creech Manor from the Haunting of Creech Manor feature film. It has 3 search locations and 3 exit spaces, but all the exit spaces are at the front of the building. You also have this window system, so 3 of the locations have windows, and they're marked with a blue border. The 2 on the right, you can only move one direction out of. You can move out of the window, down to the ground. The one on the left, there is a ladder against the wall, so you can move both directions. A lot of events, tarot cards, and equipment target these spaces, so any victim in a window space is quite vulnerable. Now, not every space here is adjacent. You can only go through the connected rooms, so you could not go straight up from where the final girl is right now. You can only go down, left, or right from where she's positioned. This makes the manor quite hard to get around, as walking from the central exit space all the way to the attic is 7 moves. Let's look at the tarot cards. The trees are alive. As I said, stay away from the windows. Victims in the windows have a very good chance of dying in this location. Something unholy happened in the is a card that can really change the game. If you've got a killer that doesn't move very fast, this can just teleport them from one end of the map to the other. I was playing a game where I was just about to kill the big bad, and they teleported all the way back up to the attic that was full of victims and just stabbed them away and powered themselves up. Very frustrating. Sometimes the reverse can happen, where you can think you're miles away from the killer, and all of a sudden they teleport down to the room you're searching in. This is a great card. And thematically, it seems to work with every single killer. And then there's the deeply frustrating, the windows and doors just slam shut. If you're outside, you can't move into the house, and if you're inside, you can't move at all. This can be very frustrating. If you're on the run from a killer who's after you, and you just have to sit there and weather some attacks for a couple of rounds, that can really break your game. Also, if you're stuck outside, that can be a complete write-off turn. For the equipment, I love the theme of the Ritual Dagger, that you can kill a victim in your space, increase bloodlust, but get rid of a minor dark power card, or just deal damage to the killer regardless of where they are. You can only do this once, but potentially if there's a minor dark power that is giving you grief, it could be worth it. A list of things in the can be a very useful card, especially if you're playing the Poltergeist on this level and you're trying to find Carolyn. It's also just a great way to see what's in a stack if you're digging for a weapon or a specific item. And I love the rope ladder because you can just place it down and just change the dynamic of the location. As for the event cards, Helicopter Rescue is a favorite. You place a helicopter marker at the attic, and once per game you can use that as an exit space. Really cool. I absolutely hate Lights Out because it means rolling 1 fewer dice when resolving an action card that allows movement. You can ignore it if you have a flashlight or a candle, but this can slow you down, especially against the Poltergeist here if they're using stiff winds, which is already reducing your movement. You can be ground to an absolute crawl. And Liquid Courage doesn't look like much, but it's a real game changer on this board. Because of all the exits being at the bottom of the board, out of the house, sometimes the direct path through the killer is by far the quickest way out. So here you can just waltz right past the killer, get to the exit space, and save the victims. So yeah, Creech Manor is a great location. It's spacious, there's lots of choke points, it's got the interesting features with the ladders and the windows, all of the escape areas being down the bottom, but then you've got some really interesting event cards and stuff in there like the helicopter. Great location, very thematic, and just about any killer works in a haunted house. My number 2 location is Camp Happy Trails. So Camp Happy Trails is very much Camp Crystal Lake from the Friday the 13th franchise. But that's not the only summer camp horror out there. There's also things like Sleepaway Camp. Summer camps are just a horror staple. How does Camp Happy Trails represent that? Let's find out. Next up we have Camp Happy Trails from the Happy Trails horror feature film. It has 3 searchable areas and 3 escape areas that are sort of equally spread around the board. It also has this unique lake spot in the middle that can be triggered off some cards. Here are some of my favourite equipment cards for this level: pepper spray, fireworks, and bear trap. Let's put down the fireworks, the bear trap, and our final girl with the pepper spray. Now the fireworks will cause the killer to walk towards the fireworks instead of going and attacking other victims. And it keeps doing that until the killer actually makes it to the firework. You also have the bear trap though, which means when the killer enters that space, they'll take damage and that will stop the killer phase immediately, meaning they won't draw a terror card. The pepper spray does something similar. It immediately ends the killer phase, meaning they won't draw a terror card. So with this crazy combo, we've essentially stopped the killer from doing anything useful for 3 whole turns. Some of my favourite events include the girlfriend, who's a special victim who will follow you around even into the killer's space and gives you an extra dice on every horror roll. If she dies, horror goes up by 5, but she is phenomenal for allowing you to run around the board quickly trying to save people. I wouldn't necessarily take her into the final fight, but leaving her at an exit space so that every time you're sprinting away from that exit space, you're getting an extra dice is a very strong play. There's also the secret tunnel, which allows you to connect any 2 search spaces. Just about every time for me, it's been the dock and the cabins. And this just allows you to go back and forth between those locations faster than the killer can. The killer can't use these tunnels. This dramatically shrinks the board and allows you to respond to the killer moving around. And then there's dark waters, which you place into the lake. Anyone in the lake is immediately killed, and whenever anyone goes out into the lake, they'll die as well. Very Jason Voorhees of Dark Waters, turning the lake into an absolute kill zone. Okay, let's take a look at some of the terror cards. Fire causes all the victims in one of the search spaces to just die. And if you're there or the enemy's there, you each lose a health. What I find fascinating about this fire compared to some of the other similar effects on other locations is this one isn't persistent. It's a one-off effect and then it goes away. Then there's Run for Your Life that causes all victims not in your space to panic. This can really dramatically change the board. It also has an attack and a move icon on it. With some killers like Hans who only have an attack icon, this card's not too bad. If you're playing with different killers though, this can be a real pain in the ass. And then there's maybe things are starting to go our way, drawing the top card of any item deck. There's no negatives to this, you just get to draw the top card of the item deck. And it's rare to see a terror card that is just straight up good for the final girl. Camp Happy Trails is just a good rock solid location. It's reasonably open, but it has some interesting choke points in it, and a couple of dead end paths. It's got the lake location in the middle, which is nice and thematic and sometimes very deadly. And it just feels like a classic horror location. And probably the best feature about Camp Happy Trails is it has no special rules. So if you're trying out one of the more complicated killers, it's a great place to set them up. Now Season 2 and Season 3 in particular have some very complex killers. And you might want to actually try them out first at Camp Happy Trails rather than play them at their own locations. Because some of the locations also come with a bunch of extra rules. I don't think there'll ever be a time when Camp Happy Trails isn't a good location to have. Now on to the last and my favorite location, and that is the Carnival of Blood. Carnival of Blood is inspired by just circuses in general, and there's a long horror tradition of circuses in horror, especially of creepy clowns. Lots of creepy clowns in horror. Now let's take a look at why this is my favorite location. Next we have the Carnival of Blood, and 3 exit spaces, one of which is located towards the middle of the board. The Carnival is defined by traps. In the terror deck there are these 3 traps. It Burns, which is the acid trap. Where the hell did these blades come from, which is the spinning floor blade trap. And I'm all wrapped up and I can't get free, which is the rope trap. These terror cards all have other effects, but they will place into play a trap token that has an ongoing effect for the rest of the scenario. And anytime a victim walks into one of these trap spaces, they dead. This location loves killing victims for you. And speaking of traps, there's also the item trap cards. In each of the items decks, there'll be an extra trap card that will go off if you search and find it. And that means searching for things to help you fight the killer can just be that much more hazardous at this location. The other terror cards are also incredibly brutal. Welcome to the Greatest Show moves everyone towards the big top and then places the killer there, and then they go do some stabbing. It's an absolutely evil card. Then How Did the Tiger Get Loose and Misty Ambush can both just kill a ton of victims. So it's good to keep in mind that the animal cages and the Forest of Horrors can just kill people. So getting victims away from them as soon as you can is a good play. The location has some great unique items too. Zappo the Carnival Monkey allows you to search spaces up to 2 away from you. And if Zappo finds a trap, you discard him, but you don't take any damage. It will scare the monkey away, but it does not harm poor Zappo. You can relax knowing that Zappo will survive this even if you don't. Then there's the found footage, which is just a great thematic card. Clearly on the VHS, you watch it somewhere and you see one of the traps in effect. So you know when you go to that location and you draw a trap card, either an item card or the terror card, you discard that trap card without any effect because you knew exactly what was going to happen. I really like found footage. I think it's a very neat card. And you got the knife bandolier, which is one of the few ways you can divide damage up amongst different targets. This is really good for dealing with Geppetto on this map because you can potentially kill all of the puppets at once. This location also has some of the best events. Clowns everywhere. During the upkeep phase, victims in the big top and any adjacent spaces panic. If they panic into a space of an enemy, they're killed automatically. That's utterly brutal, but it forces you to get into the big top and some environs and get those victims away to safety. Then you have the full moon, the werewolf. So the werewolf will randomly panic and move, and then attack whatever's in its space. The priority being victim, then final girl, then minion, then killer. Through sheer happenstance, I had the werewolf just follow a killer around one game and do 6 damage to them, and it was hilarious. And then finally there's the employee transport. This gets placed in one of the outside spaces, and it's a golf cart that allows you to move around the outside of the board. You can also drive into the enemy and do 3 damage to it. The golf cart is incredibly strong, and it's also incredibly fun, just jumping on the golf cart, moving victims around. You can also get the victims moving around by themselves. It's a great way, for example, to get people away from the Forest of Horrors.
Carnival of Blood's just brutal. It's absolutely brutal. This is a horror show location. It makes every killer you put here just that much tougher. It is a mean location, but it's kind of mean in a way that's somewhat predictable. Like, every card's gonna suck. Every card's gonna kill people. But there's little mitigations, and if you learn the location and where things are gonna happen, you can drop the risk quite quickly. I love that searching the item decks comes with a risk for once. That's very cool. And then there's the cart you drive around the outside of the board, which is just a hell of a good time. And the werewolf. This location has a little bit of everything. Every game you play here, there'll be some wacky, weird occurrence that's very memorable. Now, it does make every killer more difficult. And I think the reason people think Geppetto is quite tough is because he comes in this box. He himself, he's pretty frail. This location makes everyone just tougher. One of my favorite games was actually playing Dr. Fright at the carnival, because he was panicking people and those people were panicking into traps and dying. It was a hard time. So yeah, the Carnival of Blood. It's not the fairest location, it's not the simplest location, it's one of the harder locations, but it just makes for fun, memorable games. Now quickly, I'm just going to run through all the final girls and my thoughts on them.
Starting off with Nancy, who has 4 health and 5 slots. Move 2 spaces slot's always good, and having the long rest and planning action cards, they're alright. They're 2 cards you don't tend to use that often in the game. So getting them for free, that's fine. It's quite awkward that Nancy gets the long rest card because she has such low health. Her ultimate, on the other hand, is just not great at all. If this goes well for you, you're going to end up with plus 3 health, which puts you on 7 health. And yeah, every time you save a victim, you restore health. That's okay, but this is just incredibly underwhelming. Nancy is my least favorite final girl by some margin. Next is Adelaide, who has 6 health and 5 slots, including 2 reduced horrors, which I'm a big fan of. Her ultimate is a one-off effect. Reducing Wrath to 1 is really good if you're up against Inkanyamba or you're playing on the Sacred Groves. Recovering all health is fine, and taking 6 worth of action cards is okay. Adelaide is okay. She's really a specialist for taking on Inkanyamba or working at the Sacred Groves to get either of those tracks down.
The 6 worth of action cards can be pretty good, but for an ultimate, it's not that ultimate. Alice has only 4 health and 6 slots. 2 of them are extra moves, and I do like extra moves. Now Alice's ultimate is choose 1 named action card for the remainder of the game. Whenever you play that, you roll 5 dice. And let's be honest, it's going to be Retaliate. This is the card you're going to pick most of the time. Because having a Retaliate up your sleeve to block all damage and then do 2 damage backwards is a pretty good trick. I'm sure there are other cards people would pick, but 9 times out of 10, I'll be taking Retaliate with Alice. Now, always rolling 5 dice for a Retaliate, that's okay. But I feel for an ultimate, it's kind of mid. Next up, we've got Barbara, who's got 7 health, which is pretty solid, and 5 slots, including taking any top item card. That can be an absolute game changer, and I've used this to win games to good effect. Specifically against Geppetto one game, where the top item card was a big damage card. Ultimate allows victims to move into killer space with you, and you can essentially use victims as fodder to do additional damage. In the right situation, this is absolutely game-breaking. If you get your ultimate, and there's like a gathered sacred site or something where there's 5 different victims, and then the killer turns up and you just discard them all for extra 4 or 5 damage, that's amazing. But it's also an incredible edge case. The fact victims will move into the killer's space with you is pretty good, and it does allow you to clear the board, getting extra time and just reducing the number of victims that the killer can use to advance their bloodlust track. Barbara's okay. Next we have Asami, who's got 5 health and only 4 slots to unlock, including an amazing double horror reduction. Getting a search card and moving 1 space are also not shabby. Her ultimate leads you down a certain gameplay path, which is to rescue 4 people and then start tooling up. But you know what? That's okay. That is actually a pretty cool path to follow. You're much more likely to find powerful weapons or just the exact item you need at that time. Being immune to item track cards makes her a bit of a specialist on the Carnival, but I think her ability is strong enough, and the fact that she only needs 4 to unlock it is also quick enough that she can shine on just about any location. Selena has 6 health and 4 slots, one of which reduces horror by 2, and as I've said before, I really rate that slot. She shares a lot in common with Asami being a search specialist. So her gameplay loop is to find those 4 victims, get them out there, and then start searching for the good stuff. She just does it in a slightly different way. I think always getting the extra 2 dice is just that little bit better than drawing the extra 1 and choosing, simply because it vastly reduces the chance of actual failure. Selena's a very solid final girl if you lean into the rescue 4 then search pattern of play that she shines at. Next up is Raiko with 6 health and 5 slots, including taking a planning action card and 2 moves. Her special ability is a fascinating one. Once per action phase, if an enemy is within 2 spaces, you may move to that enemy's space for free. This is really good for rescuing victims from the killer. If there is an exit space 2 away from the killer, and you're there, you just teleport to the killer and then use your moves to get the victim away. Like a lot of the time you're going to be thinking about getting away from the killer, but think of it as being able to move past the killer as well. You move to them, then you start moving. I think she's really neat, and she's also very good at hunting down the killer in the end game. Next up we have Sheila, who has 6 health and 6 slots to unlock, and they're a real mixed bag. I like getting the improvised action card, not so sure about the long rest action card, but at least she has 6 health. Sheila is all about the end game. Discarding your 0 cost cards in particular get 2 times so you can just load up on big hits. The fact that she can get lots of time easily and her additional victim saving thing is reducing horror makes her really good in that end game. The tricky thing is, of course, saving 6 victims to get there. My number 3 final girl is Charlie. Charlie has 7 health, which makes her very tough, and 6 spaces to unlock, 3 of which reduce horror and 2 of which give bonus moves. That's like 5 of my favorite things right there, and 2 bonus time isn't bad either. These slots are all good. When she's unlocked, during the action phase you may lose 3 health to take the critical blow action directly into your hand. It does not say you may do this only once during your turn, so conceivably you can attack with a critical blow card, lose 3 health, gain it back, attack again, lose 3 health, gain it back, then take a long rest and do it again. Charlie can pump out some serious damage. I really rate her. She rarely benefits from a big round where you've used the improvised card so that you're hitting on 3s and 4s. Because with a weapon, she can do something like 15 damage pretty easily. My second favorite final girl is Melanie. She's got 5 health and 6 slots to unlock. 2 of which are moves, 1's a horror reduction, and taking a guard reaction card is quite good. Her ability is once per action phase, she may lose 1 health to deal 2 damage, divided as you choose amongst enemies in your space. Melanie is great at taking out minions. But also, this is just 2 damage a turn. That's how you've got to read it. You've got to read that you're just going to do an additional 2 damage. You move into the killer's space, you take a health damage, you do 2 damage, then you start attacking. True, she's only got the 5 health, but if you can time this properly, you can lose 2 health, do 4 damage, and against most killers, that's about half the damage you need. Plus, as I mentioned, she's exceptional against anyone using minions. And finally, my favourite final girl from Season 1 is Laurie. 5 health, which is a little on the low side, and 6 action slots. And those action slots are a bit of a mixed bag. But her ultimate, once you unlock it, is whenever you're in the same space as an enemy and inflict damage, do an additional damage. If you give her a weapon, even weak attacks are going to do 3 damage. Laurie is built for that final battle. She is so good at just tooling up and going to that final fight and going whack, 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 and killing the bad guy dead. That's my rankings for the final girls.
And the final thing we're going to rank is the boxes in general. So this is how I rank each feature film very quickly, and if you're looking at buying a feature film in this series, which ones I recommend. So we're going to start off with my least favourite one, and that is Slaughter at the Sacred Groves. I think the Sacred Groves location is the weakest component out of killers and locations in this season. I don't think it's particularly good. It's my least favourite location to play, probably in all of Final Girl. I like Inkanyamba. I think he's neat to play against himself, but he does kind of need to be decoupled from the Sacred Groves location, which I just don't find particularly fun. The number 4 box is Creech Manor. The location's pretty good. The Poltergeist does offer a different experience, and it is a unique experience, but I do find the Poltergeist quite frustrating to play against. I love what they tried doing here, I just don't necessarily like the implementation of it. Still, I like having the Poltergeist around to play, just as a change of pace. Creech Manor is pretty cool though. Creech Manor is a very good location. Definitely worth having, just for the location. And you know, Poltergeist's okay, just a little frustrating. Number 3 is the Fright Mirror at Maple Lane. I think the Maple Lane location's reasonably good, despite the issues I have with it, with searching different locations. And Dr. Fright, he's a lot of fun. This is a rock-solid box. I like both the killer and the location there. Number 2 is Carnage at the Carnival. I think Geppetto's a reasonably good killer. He's a lot of fun to play against. I still think he's got that weakness where you can just go straight at him a little bit. But the location is absolutely top drawer and a lot of fun. And I think one of the locations that once you get good at this game and once you've played it a lot, that you really appreciate. You hate it the first couple of times you play it because it's super mean, but it's one you can really get into. So overall, as a package, this is my second favourite feature film. Which of course leads to the Happy Trails Horror being the number 1 box. And this seems like a pretty consistent view across the season, that the default starter box is arguably the best box. The location is rock solid. It's not flashy, but it's super thematic and a lot of fun. And Hans is just the perfect Final Girl killer experience. He just has all the features you expect of a killer in this game. Everything else is sort of a quirky variant of this idea inside this box. So you're getting one feature film to see if you like Final Girl. You'll buy the core box, and then you'll buy this feature film, Camp Happy Trails. And I think if you don't like what's in here, if you don't like Hans and Camp Happy Trails, you're probably not going to like Final Girl at all. So I'd recommend, if you're going to look into getting into this game, to get the core box and just this feature film to try it out. Because as far as I'm concerned, this is about as good as it gets. It's not that it's all downhill from here, but they hit it out of the park with this first starter box. It's super thematic. The killer is just a real challenge and neat and cool to play against, and the location's rock solid and interesting. So yeah, that is my ranking of the feature films for Final Girl Season 1. And a reminder, to play this game you need a core box and a feature film. And the reason you buy more than one feature film is so you can mix and match killers and locations, because you play with the box, location, and add a killer, and you can use killers and locations from different boxes, if that wasn't obvious to anyone watching this video to this point. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the video. If this one does alright, I'll do Season 2, which will be these 5 feature films.
the Organism, the Evomorph, the Intruders, the Big Bad Wolf, the Ratchet Lady, and Terror from the Grave, which is the zombie vignette. Then Season 3, I'll do the Slayer, the Tormentor, Razorface, the Eyeless, the Hunter, and probably Grampus at the same time, as well as Terror from Destiny. And then hopefully by the time that's all done, Season 4 will be out, in which case I'll roll Shriek into Season 4 along with Bad Times of Buddyland and all of the other feature films that are coming out. I really like Final Girl, and something I wanted to do on the channel more is do deep dives into the games I like playing a lot. A lot of review channels will just play a game once or twice and then it's out the door. I want to show you the games that I play 100 times. I want to show you the games that I play over and over and over again. I want to share with you what it's like to go deep into a game, to sort of develop mastery and to get your money's worth out of a game. Because if you're just playing a game once or twice, I don't really feel like you've got your money out of it. With something like Final Girl, I have no idea how many plays I have of this. I've completely lost count. Just this month, I did get the Final Girl app and started recording my plays of the scenarios, so playing through all those scenarios that I mentioned. And this is quite a cool tool for tracking things. It also allows you to track achievements, and I'm a little bit of an achievement junkie, so I've been trying to go through and complete all of the scenarios, and I've done, let's say, all the Season 1 scenarios are complete now. And from here, I'm going to go through and do all of the Season 2 scenarios in preparation for doing a video on Season 2. And once I do all the scenarios for Season 2 and 3, I might just randomly, because the cool thing with the app is you can randomly assign different combinations you haven't played before and pick different boxes, so that will be fun. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, 3 Minute Board Games does not do paid content. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. And until next time, take care, everyone.